I used to believe that money was a armor, a fortress built of high-frequency algorithms, venture capital funds, and concrete high-rises that could protect me from every vulnerability in the world. But armor does not just keep the world out, it suffocates the person trapped inside. My name is Rohan Kapoor, and before I became the villain in the only story that ever truly mattered to me, I was a man terrified of being loved for my bank account rather than my soul. Rohan Kapoor is a 32-year-old South Asian tech founder with warm olive skin, almond-shaped dark brown eyes, a trimmed beard, and wavy black hair, wearing a tailored charcoal turtleneck sweater. I built an empire out of code before my 30th birthday, but every relationship I had ever tried to nurture withered under the cold glare of transactional affection. Women saw the penthouse, the private flights, the public prestige, but none of them ever saw me. So, I ran away from my own success. I took a sabbatical from my own company, traded my bespoke suits for scuffed work boots and heavy canvas trousers, and applied for an entry-level artisan position at Sterling Restorations. I wanted to build something real with my hands, and more than that, I wanted to see if anyone would ever care for a man whose only wealth was his willingness to show up, work hard, and listen. That was where I met her. Nia Sterling was a force of nature, a visionary artist who looked at crumbling historic limestone and saw forgotten beauty waiting to be rescued. Nia Sterling is a 30-year-old African-American architectural restorer with radiant, deep brown skin, high cheekbones, honey brown eyes, and tight natural curls, wearing an olive trench coat over a cream silk blouse. From the first morning, I reported to her workshop, dust floating in the morning light like suspended gold, my breathing hitched in my chest. She was measuring the decayed trim of an 18th-century door frame, her high cheekbones catching the amber sun, her natural curls held back with a simple brass clip. She did not ask me about my background or my pedigree. She simply handed me a chisel, looked into my eyes with those sharp, honey-brown depths, and told me that if I respected the craft, the wood would teach me patience. For 6 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the quiet handyman, sanding oak beams, carrying marble slabs, and learning the rhythm of her passion. By night, I locked myself in my minimalist glass penthouse, ignoring corporate emails and staring at the dust under my fingernails with a sense of pride I had never felt in boardrooms. With Nia, I felt anchored. I fell hopelessly in love with her laughter, her fierce integrity, her devotion to preservation, and the soft, tender way she held my hand when we sat on the workshop steps sharing cold coffee after hours. She loved the man in the dusty jeans. She loved the man who listened to her dreams of saving the city historic heritage. She loved Rohan the carpenter, the man who had nothing to give but his presence and his total devotion. But fear is a coward companion. Every time I intended to confess the truth, every time I sat down to tell her that I was actually Rohan Kapoor, founder of Kapoor Dynamics, the panic would choke my words. I worried that telling her would destroy the pure, unvarnished grace of what we had built. I told myself I was just waiting for the right moment, but in truth, I was hiding behind my own insecurity. The reckoning came on a Tuesday night. It did not happen quietly in our workshop over coffee. It happened under the brutal glare of high society press lights. Sterling Restorations had been nominated for a Civic Preservation Award, sponsored in part by my own corporate foundation. Nia had invited me to attend as her guest, and I had foolishly promised to meet her inside the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. I intended to arrive early, pull her aside into a private room, and finally lay down my secret before she stepped onto that stage. I arrived late because of a sudden emergency board vote. When I walked through the heavy gilded doors of the ballroom, dressed in my tailored charcoal turtleneck sweater, instead of my usual work clothes. A photographer recognized me immediately. Flashbulbs went off in rapid succession, a blinding wall of light that drew the attention of every reporter in the room. A national tech journalist thrust a microphone in my face, calling out my name, asking why billionaire Rohan Kapoor was standing at a regional architectural gala. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and saw Nia, standing 20 feet away near the podium. She was wearing her olive trench coat over a crisp cream silk blouse, holding her award plaque in her hands. The smile on her face slowly withered away, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. She watched as photographers surrounded me, listening as the reporter praised my secret philanthropic investments across the city. She looked at my tailored clothes, my dark brown eyes, my trimmed beard, and then she looked down at her own hands, as if realizing that every story I had told her, every humble gesture, every shared moment of poverty and struggle had been an elaborate stage play produced by a billionaire bored with his own reality. The look on her face in that moment haunts me to this day. It was not mere anger. It was profound, devastating betrayal. She did not see a man who was afraid of being used. She saw an arrogant tycoon who had treated her life, her business, her real struggles, and her tender heart like a game. She saw a wealthy tourist taking a tragic holiday in her world. When I finally managed to push past the journalists and reach her in the hallway outside, she walked away from me so fast her heels clattered against the marble like gunfire. "Nia, please, hear me out," I called out, my voice cracking, reaching for her sleeve. She whipped around, her honey brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, her radiant deep brown skin pale with distress. "Do not touch me," she whispered, her voice trembling with a quiet, lethal anger that chilled me to the bone. "You lied to me every single day, Rohan. You sat in my shop, you watched me worry about payroll, you let me pour my heart out to you about my struggles, while you sat on billions. Was my life an amusement park to you? Did you enjoy playing the humble worker while you judged me from your high tower?" I tried to explain. I tried to tell her about my fear, my shame, my desperate desire to be loved for who I was beneath the wealth, but my words were chaotic, defensive, and hollow. She did not hear a confession. She heard excuses. She walked out into the pouring rain, leaving me standing in that cold marble corridor, surrounded by absolute silence. For 3 months, my life became a desert. I left my corporate office vacant. I ignored my board of directors, and I sat in my empty glass penthouse watching the rain stream down the tall windows. I sent dozens of text messages, typed out hundreds of long emails, left desperate voicemail messages every single night, but every digital attempt at contact was met with a wall of silence. My number was blocked. My emails bounced back. When I tried to visit the restoration studio, her assistant politely but firmly turned me away at the door, telling me that Nia had made it very clear that Rohan Kapoor was never to set foot in her workspace again. Digital communication was too easy, too cheap, too easily dismissed as corporate spin. I had built a career on digital signals, on invisible lines of code, but code cannot carry the weight of genuine remorse. Code cannot convey the pulse of a human heart that is breaking under the weight of its own mistakes. I was losing the only woman who had ever truly seen my soul, because I was trying to solve a spiritual collapse with modern convenience. In my desperation, searching through books on reconciliation and emotional restoration, I discovered the Straight Line to Great Relationships framework. It was a revolutionary approach to human connection, teaching that true healing requires radical honesty, the removal of all self-defensive armor, and the courage to deliver unvarnished truth without expecting an immediate reward. The framework emphasized that unsaid words, left lingering in the ether of missed opportunities, turn into toxic resentment, and that the medium of delivery must match the weight of the confession. When we experience deep emotional rifts with the people who matter most, digital messages often feel hollow, disposable, and insincere. Text messages get buried, emails feel corporate, and calls go unanswered when trust is shattered. That is why turning to a physical, tangible medium is so vital for real restoration. Straight line cards offers an exquisite solution for moments when words must carry weight, substance, and permanence. By taking the time to send a beautifully crafted, personalized physical card, accompanied by a meaningful gift, you signal to your loved one that their presence in your life is worth real effort, physical time, and absolute transparency. Whether you are seeking forgiveness, celebrating an unspoken milestone, or simply refusing to let your deepest feelings linger unsaid in the shadows, a physical keepsake card creates an immediate, lasting bridge between two hearts. Never let the words that could heal your relationship stay trapped behind a glass screen. Visit Straight Line Cards today and send a physical testament of your true feelings that your loved one can touch, hold, and cherish forever. I ordered a custom, heavy cotton keepsake card from Straight Line Cards. When the physical card arrived at my penthouse, its textured surface and substantial weight felt like a sacred anchor in my hands. Sitting at my desk under the soft light of a single brass lamp, I picked up a fountain pen and began to write. I did not use corporate jargon. I did not offer financial compensation or grand romantic gestures. I followed the straight line framework, stripping away every single layer of my pride. I wrote about my childhood, about growing up feeling like an outsider, about the overwhelming loneliness that settled over my life when my tech company exploded into success. I admitted my deep-seated cowardice, how I had used my humble handyman persona not out of playfulness, but out of absolute fear that no one would ever love Rohan the human being if they knew about Rohan the mogul. I confessed that my lie had not been an attempt to manipulate her, but an attempt to protect my fragile ego, and that in protecting myself, I had committed the ultimate injustice against her honesty, her dignity, and her love. I poured my heart onto that heavy paper, writing until the ink was dry and my hand trembled. I enclosed no money, no expensive jewelry, no grand promises, only the raw, unvarnished truth of a broken man asking for nothing more than the grace to be heard one last time. The next evening at dusk, as twilight settled over the historic cobblestone district of the city, I walked down the narrow street toward Sterling Restorations. My heart was pounding like a hammer against anvil, my pulse rushing in my ears. I was wearing my charcoal turtleneck sweater, carrying no bodyguards, no public relations advisors, no corporate defense. I was just Rohan, exposed, terrified, and entirely honest. The street was quiet, rain glistened on the old brick facades, and a cold autumn wind blew fallen leaves across the pavement. I pushed open the heavy wooden door of the workshop. The iron bell above the door chimed, a familiar sound that brought a wave of painful, beautiful memories flooding back into my chest. The workshop smelled of pine shavings, linseed oil, and old stone, the scents that had come to mean home to me over those 6 months. Nia was standing near the center drafting table, a pencil tucked behind her ear, her radiant deep brown skin illuminated by the warm overhead work lights. Her tight natural curls framed her face, her high cheekbones set in a line of weary, guarded composure. She froze when she heard my footsteps. She looked up, her honey brown eyes widening with immediate shock, followed quickly by a wall of defensive coldness that made my breath catch in my throat. I told my assistant to tell you never to come back here, Rohan, she said, her voice quiet, sharp, and cut through the stillness like a razor. You have no right to enter my studio. You have taken enough of my time, my trust, and my craft. I stood my ground, 5 paces away from her drafting table. I did not step closer, respecting her boundary, but I held out the physical card in my hand. The heavy, textured envelope sat between us, a tangible bridge across an ocean of pain. I am not here to invade your space, Nia, I said softly, my voice steady despite the absolute storm raging inside my chest. I am not here to ask you to take me back. I am not here to defend what I did. I came here because I owe you the absolute truth, delivered in a way that respects the gravity of what I broke. I wrote this for you. No screens, no press releases, no corporate excuses. Just my heart on paper. If you read it and tell me to leave forever, I will turn around and you will never see me again. But please, give me the chance to let you know who I really am. She looked at the card in my outstretched hand. For several agonizing seconds, the only sound in the historic workshop was the slow ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the distant sound of rain against the window panes. She set her pencil down on the drafting table, her hands trembling slightly, her gaze fixed on the heavy cream card stock. Why paper, Rohan? She asked, her voice cracking with an emotional friction that broke my heart. Why bring a card to a place you destroyed with lies? Because digital words are cheap, I answered, taking a slow, dramatic breath, strictly honoring the pauses that the truth demanded. Because I hid behind screens and algorithms my entire life, Nia. I hid behind money because I was terrified that if anyone saw the real me, they would find me empty. But when I was here with you, sanding those beams, carrying those stones, listening to you talk about restoring history, I felt whole for the first time in my life. I gave you a lie because I was a coward. This card contains the truth, unedited, unvarnished, and entirely yours to keep or burn. Nia walked slowly toward me, her olive trench coat swaying with her rhythmic steps. Her honey-brown eyes searched my face, scanning my eyes, my posture, looking for any trace of the corporate executive who had deceived her. She saw none. She saw only the man who had sat on the floor with her, covered in sawdust, holding her hand when she was tired. She reached out and took the card from my fingers. The physical contact was brief, but it sent an electric charge through my core. She did not open it immediately. She held the heavy card stock, feeling its weight, her thumb tracing the tactile quality of the paper. She walked back to her drafting table, pulled up a stool, and sat down. With slow, deliberate movements, she broke the seal of the envelope and pulled out the handwritten card. I stood in silence near the entrance, watching her read. I watched her eyes move across the fluid lines of black ink. I watched as the cold, guarded armor she had put up over the past 3 months slowly began to melt away under the heat of pure transparency. When she reached the second page, where I detailed my mother passing, my deep isolation, and the terrifying moment I realized I had fallen completely in love with her while fixing an old door frame, a single tear escaped her eye and traced a shining path down her radiant deep round skin. She pressed her fingers against her lips, her chest heaving as she swallowed a dry sob. She sat there for what felt like an eternity, holding the card against her chest, staring down at the handwritten words that had bridged the divide between our worlds. When she finally looked up at me, the coldness was gone. In its place was a profound, raw vulnerability, a mixture of lingering pain and cautious, emergent forgiveness. You were afraid, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustle of the pine shavings on the floor. You were surrounded by wealth, and you were afraid that nobody saw you. Every single day of my life, I confessed, stepping forward one slow pace at a time, My eyes locked on hers. Until I met you, Nia. You saw me when I had nothing to offer but my hands. And instead of honoring that gift, I panicked because I was terrified of losing it. I am so sorry. I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for treating your trust like something I could manage with corporate strategy. She stood up from her stool, setting the card down carefully beside her drafting blueprints. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of me. The air between us was electric, dense with the weight of unsaid feelings finally set free, saturated with the promise of a second chance built on absolute truth. I do not care about your billions, Rohan, she said, her honey brown eyes shining with absolute clarity, her hand reaching out to touch the soft fabric of my charcoal turtleneck sweater. I never cared about what you had in the bank. I cared about the man who listened to my dreams. I cared about the man who helped me fix what was broken. But if we are going to rebuild this, if we are ever going to have a future, there can be no more masks. No more hidden identities. No more hiding behind armor. I reached out and took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth of her fingers, the strength of her spirit, and the total grace of her forgiveness. I look into her eyes and make a silent vow to spend every day of my life being completely transparent, totally present, and profoundly grateful for the woman who taught me that true love is not bought, traded, or hidden. It is built, stone by stone, word by unvarnished word, on the foundation of radical honesty.